Ladies and gentlemen, um, today I want to talk about something deeply personal and yet universally important. The moment you recognize that it's time to cut ties, even with family or friends. It's one of the hardest decisions you can make, but it's also one of the most empowering. We are all told that family and friends are supposed to be the people who lift us up, who provide a sense of safety, trust, and unconditional love. But what happens when those very relationships become sources of pain, frustration, and negativity? What do we do when we realize that staying in those relationships is costing us more than we can afford emotionally, mentally, and even physically? The first sign is when self-worth is compromised. In any relationship, especially those with family or close friends, you should feel seen, heard, and valued for who you are. But when you're constantly questioning your worth, when you find yourself shrinking to fit into someone else's expectations or feeling like you're not enough no matter what you do, that's when the damage begins. Often we get caught up in these relationships because we feel obligated or because we've been conditioned to think that the love and validation we seek should come from these people, no matter how they treat us. The reality is, if someone consistently makes you feel small, unworthy, or like you're not good enough, that's not love, that's a pattern of undermining your self-esteem. You begin to internalize that treatment and it chips away at your confidence and your ability to trust your own worth. Relationships should not make you question your place in the world or your value as a person. They should affirm it when you feel unseen, unheard, or as though you have to prove your worth constantly. You're being asked to settle for less than what you truly deserve. And that can be a painful realization that the people closest to you are not contributing to your growth, your confidence, or your sense of self, but rather draining you of IT. Secondly, if there is toxicity in the relationship, manipulation, emotional abuse, or relentless negativity, it's crucial to acknowledge how these behaviors affect your emotional and mental health. Toxic relationships often begin subtly with small moments of manipulation or seemingly harmless comments that chip away at your self-esteem. Over time, these actions can escalate, and you may find yourself questioning your reality or doubting your own perceptions. Manipulation is a key trait of toxic behavior. It can look like guilt tripping, playing the victim, or using your vulnerabilities against you. You might feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells trying to manage the other person's emotions or actions to avoid conflict. Emotional abuse is equally damaging but often goes unnoticed because it doesn't leave physical scars. It's the cruel criticism, the belittling remarks, the subtle put-downs that make you feel less than, as though your feelings are invalid or not worthy of respect. Relentless negativity, on the other hand, can leave you feeling drained, as though no matter how hard you try, you're never enough. It might seem like the person never has anything positive to say, always pointing out your flaws or focusing on what's wrong rather than supporting you in your growth. The emotional toll of these patterns can be exhausting, leading to anxiety, self-doubt, and even depression. What's often overlooked in these toxic dynamics is how they create a constant sense of instability. You never know where you stand, and that uncertainty keeps you stuck. It's important to recognize that no matter how much you care for someone, staying in a toxic relationship only prolongs your suffering. Toxicity in any form is not an acceptable part of a healthy connection, and allowing it to persist only erodes your sense of self and your ability to trust. Third, think about authenticity. Authenticity is the foundation of any meaningful relationship, and it's what allows us to feel true to ourselves. When we are around people who accept us for who we are without judgment or pretense, we are free to express our thoughts, feelings, and ideas without fear of rejection. However, when we find ourselves altering who we are to fit someone else's expectations, the toll on our emotional and mental well-being is profound. We may suppress parts of ourselves, our values, desires, and even our dreams just to maintain the peace or avoid conflict. We start becoming versions of ourselves that are only fragments of who we really are, adjusting constantly to the needs and demands of others. This kind of self-censorship is emotionally exhausting because it prevents us from showing up as our authentic selves. We end up living in a constant state of compromise, trying to keep people around us happy at the expense of our own happiness. But authenticity is not about perfection or always being in alignment with others. It's about being true to your core values and allowing yourself to express who you truly are. If you feel like you have to wear a mask to maintain relationships, then those relationships are likely not serving you in the way that they should. Over time, this can lead to a deep sense of disconnection, not just from the people around you, but from yourself as well. You may begin to lose touch with what truly matters to you, your own desires and your own sense of purpose, because you've been living to meet someone else's idea of who you should be. The cost of this is immense. The emotional energy spent on pretending or conforming takes away from the energy you could be using to nurture your true self and pursue your real passions. Another sign is when you recognize that you've outgrown the relationship. Growth is a natural part of life. We evolve in our thinking, our feelings, and our goals, and sometimes as we progress on our journey, the relationships we once had no longer fit. It's not that the other person is bad or that you no longer care about them, but simply that your paths have diverged. You might find that you no longer share the same interests, values, or aspirations. Where you once had a common vision, you now find yourselves moving in completely different directions. You may feel like you're holding on to a past version of yourself, a version that existed when the relationship made sense, but no longer reflects who you are today. This kind of realization can be incredibly difficult, especially when the relationship has been a significant part of your life. You may feel guilty for wanting to move on, for acknowledging that you no longer resonate with the person or the dynamic you once had. But growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. It often means evolving beyond what is familiar. Staying in relationships that no longer nurture your personal growth can stunt your progress. It can trap you in old patterns and prevent you from stepping into the person you are becoming. This doesn't mean that the other person is wrong or that their journey should be the same as yours, but sometimes the healthiest choice for both parties is to acknowledge that the relationship has run its course. It's a painful but necessary step toward honoring your own evolution and embracing the new, more expansive life that's calling you forward. When respect and trust begin to erode, it signals that the foundation of the relationship is in jeopardy. Respect is the cornerstone of any healthy relationship, whether it's with family, friends, or a romantic partner. It's how we acknowledge each other's worth, boundaries, and individuality. When respect begins to fade, it's often replaced by dismissiveness, contempt, or even disregard for each other's needs and emotions. This kind of shift can happen slowly, almost imperceptibly, until you realize that the person you once felt safe with no longer sees you as an equal, or worse, takes you for granted. Trust, too, is a fragile thing. It takes years to build, but only moments to destroy. Once trust begins to unravel, whether through betrayal, dishonesty, or repeated hurtful actions, it becomes nearly impossible to repair without both parties being committed to rebuilding it. The thing about trust is that once it's compromised, even the smallest actions can trigger doubt or suspicion. A single lie can cause a ripple effect, and what once felt like a secure, reliable connection becomes clouded with uncertainty and fear. You may start second-guessing their intentions, questioning their words, or wondering whether they truly have your best interests at heart. The emotional labor of constantly wondering if you can trust someone or feeling like you're being disrespected weighs heavily on your well-being. The longer this continues, the more strained and painful the relationship becomes. Instead of feeling supported, loved, and valued, you start to feel like you're walking on thin ice, unsure of where the next crack will appear. And in a relationship where respect and trust no longer exist, it's hard to imagine the emotional security or safety you need to truly thrive. The erosion of these essential elements often leads to emotional exhaustion and a quiet but growing resentment that makes it increasingly difficult to continue investing in the relationship. And finally, the guilt. The guilt that comes with making the decision to cut ties is often the most challenging part of the process. We are conditioned to believe that family and friends should be in our lives, no matter what, that walking away from them, especially if they are people we've loved for years, is a betrayal. We feel guilty for choosing ourselves over others, for setting boundaries that might hurt someone we care about. That guilt is powerful. It whispers to you that you're being selfish, that you're not trying hard enough, or that you should just accept the relationship for what it is, because after all, this is family or this is a lifelong friendship. But what we often fail to realize is that prioritizing our own mental and emotional well-being is not a selfish act. In fact, it's a form of self-respect. By staying in a relationship that continuously drains you, disrespects your boundaries, or hurts your soul, you are sacrificing your own peace and your own growth. It's hard, I know, to let go of the people who were once your source of comfort, who were once central to your world. But guilt has a way of making us second guess what we know to be true. It has a way of twisting our perception, making us feel like we are wrong for doing what is necessary for our health and happiness. But here's the truth you are allowed to let go. You are allowed to walk away from relationships that no longer serve you, no matter who they are. The guilt may linger for a while, but with time you'll realize that choosing peace, self-respect, and growth is the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the relationship. Growth and change are an inevitable part of life, and they come with their own set of challenges. As we move through different stages of life, we begin to understand ourselves more deeply, evolve in our thinking, and shift our values. These changes are often uncomfortable as they force us to confront old patterns, question what we believe to be true, and sometimes let go of parts of our past. And the truth is, not everyone we once shared a deep connection with will evolve in the same way. Some people will grow with us, supporting and encouraging us along the way, while others may remain stagnant, clinging to the past, or resisting change altogether. When you outgrow a relationship, it doesn't mean that the other person is flawed or that the relationship was ever unimportant. It simply means that you have evolved beyond what it was, and continuing to stay in it may hold you back from the person you are becoming. We need something different, something more aligned with our values and goals. And other times, the other person's lack of growth or their unwillingness to change can create a disconnect that's impossible to ignore. Holding on to a relationship that no longer fits with your evolving self is like trying to wear shoes that are too tight they might have fit once, but they no longer serve you. Growth is about stepping into your full potential, and sometimes that requires making difficult decisions about the relationships you maintain. Change might feel isolating at first, but it is a necessary part of stepping into the next chapter of your life. Mutual respect and trust are the bedrock of any strong and healthy relationship. Without these two elements, the foundation begins to crumble, no matter how much history or love is involved. Respect means acknowledging each other's worth, treating one another with kindness, and honoring personal boundaries. It's about valuing the other person's feelings, thoughts, and experiences, and not dismissing or minimizing them. When respect is present, we feel safe to be vulnerable, to express ourselves authentically, and to trust that our needs will be heard. But when respect fades, it's often replaced by disregard or even contempt. We stop seeing the other person as a partner in the relationship and start seeing them as someone who can be ignored, dismissed, or manipulated for our own gain. Trust equally is fragile. It's built over time through consistent actions, honesty, and transparency. Trust is not just about not lying or being faithful. It's about showing up, being reliable, and being there when the other person needs you. It's the quiet assurance that you can count on them, that their words match their actions, and that you are both committed to building something meaningful together. When trust erodes, it can be difficult to even remember what it felt like to feel truly safe with someone. The smallest breach can create cracks that, over time, expand into deep fissures. And the longer the distrust continues, the more difficult it becomes to repair. You may find yourself questioning everything, every word, every action, and every promise. Instead of feeling supported and understood, you begin to feel isolated and anxious. In relationships where respect and trust are missing, it becomes impossible to feel secure. You might start feeling like you're constantly walking on eggshells, unsure of where you stand or how the other person will react. This instability can be emotionally exhausting, leading to a sense of constant tension that makes it difficult to move forward, to connect, or even to understand where the relationship is headed. Without these crucial pillars of respect and trust, what's left is a relationship built on uncertainty, resentment, and a lack of safety. And no matter how much effort you put in, it becomes harder and harder to rebuild. Breaking free from guilt is one of the most liberating steps you can take when making the difficult decision to distance yourself from a relationship, even if it's with family or close friends. Guilt is a powerful and insidious emotion. It often tells us that we are doing something wrong, that we are betraying those we love, or that we should sacrifice our own well-being for the sake of others. This guilt is especially strong when the relationship has been a significant part of your life for a long time, and you feel like you're abandoning someone who's always been there, or at least who used to be there in the way you needed. It often tries to convince you that prioritizing your own emotional and mental health is a selfish act, that you should continue to endure pain or discomfort for the sake of keeping the peace or fulfilling a societal expectation. But what we often fail to realize is that guilt is not a clear indicator of right and wrong. It's an emotion that often clouds our judgment and pulls us away from our truth. Guilt can prevent us from setting necessary boundaries and from choosing relationships that are healthy, supportive, and life-giving. It can keep us stuck in situations where we feel drained, invalidated, or even harmed because we fear the consequences of standing up for ourselves. The truth is that self-care is not a selfish act, it is a necessary one. You are allowed to make decisions that prioritize your emotional and mental well-being, even if they are difficult, and even if they come with feelings of guilt. The guilt you may feel is often a sign that you are confronting a deeply ingrained belief that your worth is tied to others' approval or to meeting their needs at the expense of your own. But you are allowed to choose yourself, to honor your own needs, and to create space for your own healing. And over time, as you begin to understand that prioritizing your well-being is not only okay, but essential, the guilt will lessen. You will start to recognize that by breaking free from the guilt, you are making room for healthier relationships, for growth, and for a deeper connection with yourself. In closing, making the decision to cut ties with someone, even family or friends, is never easy. It's one of the most painful and complex choices we can make, but it's also one of the most empowering. We are all deserving of relationships that uplift us, respect our boundaries, honor our authenticity, and support our growth. Relationships that leave us questioning our worth, draining our energy, or holding us back from becoming who we're meant to be are not relationships that serve us. Recognizing when it's time to step away takes courage to honor your own needs, to break free from guilt, and to protect your peace. Growth and change are inevitable, and sometimes letting go of a relationship that no longer fits who we are is the healthiest step we can take. Remember, it's not about rejecting the other person, but about accepting and loving yourself enough to know that you deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate you, respect you, and walk with you on your journey of becoming. Choosing yourself is not an act of selfishness, it's an act of self-respect, and in doing so, you create space for deeper, more authentic connections with others. You deserve relationships that allow you to show up as your full, true self without apology, without compromise. Trust yourself, honor your boundaries, and know that the decision to let go is a gift to both yourself and the relationship. Thank you